We are halfway through our 3-class series, although the first half of our classes are longer. So you just have another hour or so, actually a little less because we're sorry we took a little time. The philosophical discussions from the subjects we were treating in the first half brought out a lot of discussion and questions and answers and teachings. So that's just the way we are. We hope that you're the same, or that you will become the same as you get interested in this, as what Lex Hickson, our founder, and myself used to agree upon was the only solution to problems in relativity. It's this dharma. And yes, it happens at a qualified non-dual level where the teachings become important. People are courting the non-dual, but I think sometimes they overlook the fact that the non-dual is a very difficult position to stay at. It's like a mountain climb, without any toe holds. We'll probably look at this chart next week because it does start at the pure sattva level and move on from there. So I intended to have it follow up the teaching on the gunas of prakriti. But that's kind of what the non-dual level is like. It's without even fingernail holds. It's just it's simultaneously simple but profound. It's natural but inscrutable. So one has to live in it and condition oneself to it. It might be the last conditioning you'll ever do, is to try and condition the mind to be unconditioned. So you can think about it in terms of paradoxes like that. But since it's the middle of our second class, you'll have next week, you'll have this week to look back on these 2 classes and the one last week, Sunday classes. But we'll also go on with the rest of this class, fleshing out this chart on solutions, because we had the Clistivity, which has really been emphasized by the father of yoga, Patanjali, and his solutions are coming forth here from those considerations. Many of these are taken from the 8 limbs of yoga. So launching back into this, we were talking about turbulent, contrary vibrations that confuse and fluster the mind. Sometimes you might get a little rest from that. It's like vikshipta mind. Sometimes it's feeling okay. Sometimes it's erratic and back and forth. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, it's like a fly lighting on sweets and then unpleasant things, back and forth. The mind has that guna going on, mixed guna. But if you have that mind, you probably have a little bit of wiggle room to be able to do what's very difficult to do when you're depressed. That's a hard place to fall into, and difficult to get out of. Almost then, you're depending on cycles of time. I know people who are troubled. I used to advise in that way. I just tell them, it'll pass. It'll pass. It's the mantra you have to use for that kind of mind and those kinds of souls who are caught in it. That's actually a beam of light. As you're thinking it'll pass, you are changing the vritti of the mind. It's beginning to look for the moment that it will pass, so it's really beginning to look for the light and the end of the darkness. So that begins to teach you that you can, with your own willpower, and should, with your own willpower, change up your mind. You should experiment with that, change it. Do it again and again until you get flexible and facile with it. So, with that kind of mind, Father of Yoga and other great seers of India would say, you need darshana, keeping holy company with the Guru, Sangha, and other enlightened beings. So this can smooth out the confused mind very well. You get in a peaceful atmosphere like that and you immediately feel. I've heard it even over the last couple days. I came into this atmosphere and I just feel so much better. I feel like I've come home. And into our shrine room here at this beautiful little center we call Kedarnath. Walk in here and you just feel the vibration right there in the heart. And that changes the mind. The mind and the heart really are one thing for us. That Meda Kendra is the Sanskrit word. the mind that puts itself at the feet of the heart. And it's wisdom serving love, and love making wisdom less dry. So we have that ideal, holding two yogas at once, or two ideals at once, according to Sri Ramakrishna. So I know people who are very advanced and had control over their minds all the time, like our founder. And he would still go to darshan everywhere. He could go with the Sufis, with the Buddhists, with the Zen Buddhists, with the Vedantas. He was like drinking that stuff in all the time, and he didn't really need it. I mean, he probably benefited by it, but he didn't have to go running there out of desperation or something like some people. Like one relative of mine coming to my Swami and say, if you don't free me, I'm going to kill myself. So my Swami had to deal with that. So that kind of desperation that happens to people, that they want relief from that, what Shankara calls the hot, arid desert of the world. And this nectar of Dharma that will quench the thirst of a person like that. It's the only thing that will. So darshana. Number 5, there's just 3 more of these. Kashaya vritti was, of course, vibrations rising from the mind due to the enjoyment of pleasures. You can't get away with it. You know, this is like, I can have pleasure without pain. No. Then I can have pleasure even if pain doesn't come. Pleasure won't somehow act on me negatively. No. Even if you could somehow avoid pain, which some people actually get pretty good at doing, they run away and hide from it, sweep it under the carpet kind of thing, they can get very good at just maintaining a pleasurable life. It's kind of a worldly life that they've mastered the ability of that, but it leaves behind a residue, is probably the best word, in the mind, a subtle residue that's creating a samskara that builds a vritti of enjoyment as one of the gifts you take back to the heavens, to the ancestors, because they're wanting to keep that enjoyment going too all the time, with lands, with wealth, and some diseases that come along with it, like domination over others and wars, come out of that kind of problem. And so basically it's a good thing to know that you could do something like, in this chart, pratyahara, practice of withdrawing the mind from thoughts of sense objects. That's a good basic overall general definition for the 5th limb of yoga, pratyahara. It's what I've often called a tripping place for most people in the West, is that they love objects so much they don't really see they don't really see the reason to give up objects. So they're not making the connection between objects, pleasure, and karmas that come back. And not just painful karmas, as I'm saying, but karmas of attachment to pleasure, which is a very boring thing after a while. You can get glutted and not feel pain. It's like eating too much, kind of thing. You just eat too big a meal, and you're just sitting there feeling bloated, and you're not really suffering in a sense, like pain suffering, but you're just feeling uncomfortable. Well, that's what too much pleasure does to the soul. And so, people are willing to more and more renounce that, or practice diminishing their appetites. It's one of the teachings of all the great teachers is to try and limit your sensual appetites. The word is moderation. Try to moderate all your appetites. So, practice the withdrawing of the mind from thoughts of sense objects. Not just the objects themselves, because that doesn't always work very long. Like, Sri Ramakrishna had stories about that. A man decided he'd go away and renounce the world, so he went to Varanasi. And then a week later, they get a telegraph back at home, "Oh, I got a good job." So, where does this resolve go to renouncing the world that he was so fired up about, maybe in a sattvic state? with a little rajas mixed in. And he gets there and he gets an opportunity and gives that whole idea up and gets back into rajas and activity. So that's how indeterminate people are with their decisions and their commitments. That's why we have vrata, vows. Talking to one young man in Europe the other day, I'm going to take a vow with you, several vows with you. I'm not into the world. I never have been. So one likes to hear that from people in the West particularly. Because in India, of course, they have thousands of souls. One of the greatest miracles, as things go, is Vivekananda's ability to attract young men, lots of young men, and some young women to the monastic life, and vow of brahmacharya, and committing oneself to serving the Lord in human beings. It's amazing. That's never happened before in such a short time with so many people. So it's good that it would happen here in the West some. Then you have Gunas Vrittis, ungrounded vibrations which cause the mind's awareness to drift. So there's where they're going to want you to practice dharna. This is really going right up the limbs of yoga. You had yamas, niyamas, pratyahar, dharna. So you want to have this inward focus on nature of mind and awareness. Study snow conditions, like the Eskimo. And also come to know that snow doesn't stick on a wet road. So you're going to have to do several things there in the snow stories of Sri Ramakrishna to have the most positive effect come out of this focus, so that the mind won't drift anymore. Because that, you've done that since you were in grade school, looking out the window. And the teacher also says, you're daydreaming. So this dreaming gets into everything we do from a very early age. And what they're trying to do with young people in the monastic institutions and in the dharmic families, so to get them to focus right away. The focus, then pain and pleasure goes away. The focus becomes your focus. What's your focus? Focus. So that becomes the payoff to everything. Concentration. I've always said that, and it doesn't matter whether it's worldly life you're talking about or earthly life, because I think those are sometimes two different things. One's more practical, one's more attached to unreal things. Or spiritual life, or spiritual practice, is that if concentration is there, you'll be a success along that avenue, no doubt. But if distraction is there, these other vrittis take over, then that's going to ruin your efforts every time. Certainly true in Lord Vasishtha's stories about great souls who had done all their practice and fell down at the last minute because of a little lapse in concentration. Due to some, put it this way, some fiber sticking out of the thread. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, I've already got that listed as a God bog to do, but basically, it won't fit through the needle, and you can't even really see the fiber unless you, really examine it up close with a magnifying glass. So you're trying to get this very inscrutable, difficult, almost impossible attainment under your belt of having your first experience of thoughtless, vrittiless, gunaless, perfect consciousness that's as pure and infinite as the sky and as vast as the ethers. But you're having this one problem of falling back all the time. So that's why it's placed as the sixth limb of yoga, so that meditation will be the way it should be, because it's based on your unbroken concentration. And Chanchala Vritti comes next for that. So that's another common, not only problem, but some people actually it becomes a deception. I've had people tell me they had samadhi, and I said, describe it for me, and my mind just drifted. All of a sudden I was aware, and all of a sudden I wasn't. Was that samadhi? No, that wasn't samadhi. Awareness can't become unaware. Consciousness can't become unconscious. They may even put words forth like superconscious state, or super sensual, to make sure that that it increases the senses, or it increases your ability to expand your mind and your consciousness to know Brahman, as the Upanishads say. So that's where dhyana and samadhi together, and of course we know that's called samyama in yoga, where you put together concentration, meditation, and samadhi, and you'll be able to gain anything out of all 7 worlds with samyama. You can see the past, you can see the future, see the whole cosmic process, because someone told me at the break just a few minutes ago, looking at these charts, when I first saw them, it was a little bit like Greek. Now looking at it, it just seems like so obvious that this is the way things are. And I was thinking, and I didn't get to respond, that that's Adidaiva Vidya. Adi, original, Daiva, divine, Vidya, wisdom. The original divine wisdom was this, and we've forgotten it. I think even to a great extent India has forgotten it. This is indispensable. This shows you what's going on all levels of life and existence, all levels. And it doesn't matter that there's a few Sanskrit words in there, or some philosophy, or some input and opinions by realized souls. That actually helps the whole thing. You don't need to be put off by it because it's, it wasn't founded in Greek or Rome, or it wasn't, able to send roots down yet in America, or in Europe even that much. So that's how important this is. To understand it through English words is what we're trying to do here. So you really can't put forth the complaint that, there's some Sanskrit there. No, we're defining this in English for you, and English is actually a very good language to do that in. Most people would agree with that. English is very broad and good language. And so Vivekananda came at just the right time here, and ironically, the English were in India early, and they all learned English too. Isn't English the first language in India, they call it now? As you go to the provinces, they each have their own personal first language, but overall it's basically all English. So was this a horrible cultural thing, or was it just really the intention of the mother that we could all understand each other better, and these teachings could come to America? Vivekananda could bring them to England, right in the face of all that. It's like, there's this problem, with injustice going on between the Caucasians and the Hindus. Well, I'm not going to be able to stop that. Even God is helpless, Krishna said. So I'll just put in it what's going to solve it. And what's going to do away with the karma. I'll just put it in along as it's happening. They'll learn the lessons of how it's happening, the karma that comes from it. But what I'm going to put in there is also this solution that they'll know never to do it again, or how to get out of it because of what I'm going to add into it. And it's going to be this Adidaiva Vidya, this original divine wisdom, so that you can look at the whole picture, like on an 8x11, with certain divine stations in it, and what's sentient and what's insentient, and what's lower vibration and what's higher vibration, and what's lower guna and what's higher guna, and just be clear like that, clear as a bell. This is Durga's own bell, by the way, which she scares away all negativities. So dhyan, samadhi, meditation without breaks, in order to realize the continuity of awareness. Very nice way that English can put that again, empowering English with wisdom. The continuity of awareness, the homogeneity of awareness, the indivisibility of awareness, the all-pervasiveness of awareness, the essence and origin of all awareness. It is the origin unto itself. So that's all well put. That's what I want to show about this chart. Remember that, prati, kind of means like this obvious thing. Like a pratyahar is an image that you worship. A pratyama is, an image that you worship. So pratibha would mean you're seeing the flint-like intelligence in yourself, therefore you're seeing it in others. And but there are bandhas to it, and there are basakas to it. Problems and solutions. If you know them, you can apply them and remain free of the traps and bondages and be as free as the air you breathe, Vivekananda said. So that covers this. Sri Ramakrishna, we can take his quote at the bottom. Using spiritual disciplines, the aspirant after perfection destroys all mental obstacles, snaps the chain of rebirth, and attains freedom from suffering. We know Swami Vivekananda wrote that beautiful hymn, O Breaker of this World's Chains. So, just the title of that alone in English tells it, oh, you mean there are chains here to break? I didn't know I was bound. Is the fact that nobody's thinking that they're bound a good thing? I would ask. Or is it better to know that there's a ruse going on, there's a wool pulled over your eyes? You're not the body. Objects won't fulfill you. Suffering is the first noble truth. And so. Somebody has to come forward and inform you about this. Isn't that a good thing then? So sleeping in delusion is never a good thing. And trying to live in Maya, also not. So let's coin the mother of all four-letter words. India said. Later on, they'll have some real gross four-letter words. No, but we're going to have the most subtle four-letter word of all called Maya, and we're going to define it simply and say you're in it, and now extract yourself from it. Or listen to a non-dualist like Vivekananda come and tell you, Maya, you're never in Maya. Maya's in you, so get rid of it. Just like that, it's gone. Explorer with a torch into a cave. And the explorer, in this term, is Sri Ramakrishna, no doubt, as we would sing. Mangalam Deshikendraya Yaminam Chakravartine Parashakti Swarupine Devyai Bhavatu Mangalam Satya Sandasya Bhattasya Kshudiramasya Sunave Gadadaraya Mediam Avatirnaya Mangalam Gadadaraya Sunamne Chap Bhaktya Veshtita Chesase Andratanya Vidyaya Mangalam Brahmacharini Mangalam Guru Devaya Devya Matrecha Mangalam Mangalam Bhaktya Vrindeya Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Cha Dharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Ramakrishnaya Mangalam. Auspiciousness verily epitomizes Sri Ramakrishna, who is the incomparable teacher of mankind in this age, whose spiritual centers flow with the essence of primal Shakti energy. May all auspiciousness attend upon him. Behold the contemporary incarnation of Lord Vishnu, fittingly named Gadadhar, the holder of the law, who was the most excellent son of his loving father, Kshutiram. May all auspiciousness attend upon him. Reverently titled Gadadhar, the one who sports the war club that destroys ignorance, who became fully absorbed in spiritual exercises and ecstasies even as a young child, May all auspiciousness attend upon him. Full of compassion, compassionate moods and qualities, who willingly inhabited the sacred temple of Ma Kali, and who performed sincere and devout worship of her there, may all auspiciousness attend upon him. The establisher of the eternal Dharma on earth, who also epitomizes the essence of all dharmas, and who is the full consummation of all previous incarnations of God, may all auspiciousness attend upon him. All auspiciousness be to Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. All auspiciousness be to Sri Sharda Devi, his divine consort, and may all auspiciousness attend upon all of their devotees and disciples. May this auspiciousness bless all beings. Some of these beautiful verses of Sri Ramakrishna Mangalam. So how several million people now think about him, and growing force all the time with more numbers who are waking up from this enchantment of the old witch of the world and its influence of gunas and its dark taint of negative thoughts and its regimens of methods that will help one to overcome all these problems of life that people are complaining about. And those problems are probably what we want to look at here in this other new chart called the Hospital of the World. So probably take us up to the end of this class, which we have some time left, and which we will complete it if we don't. But yeah, here's the emergency word here. First thing the eye falls upon. Yes, everything is not all right in Maya. Everything will be all right, they say. Well, we hope so. Good luck with that. But we're thinking maybe we should have some backup plan here. We should have some... We should look at Mother Durga and see that she has a shield, a bow, an arrow, a mace, a japamala, a wine cup, and other things that she's just standing there holding in front of us. Like, should we get those? How about your sword? Can I have that first? So that's what we just sang. Sri Ramakrishna's centers, his spiritual centers, were all full of the flow of divine Shakti. Isn't that beautiful? Just wide open, flowing with this primal divine energy, the Devatma Shakti. Like she's not a form, she's like some liquid or something. And if she has a vibration at all, it breaks down all other vibrations and overcomes them and transforms the mind thinking process as we want to do. So he says, you may think that everything is going to be over, but God will not release you as long as the slightest trace of your illness is left. You simply cannot leave the hospital if your name is registered there. As long as the illness is not perfectly cured, the doctor won't give you a permit to go. Why did you register your name in the hospital at all? In one simple phrase from the great master is talking non-duality, what you should always know when you come to earth and take on a form. When you see any sign of vibration or feel any vibration or see the effects of vibration, you should have that immediate thought of discrimination between the real and the unreal. That's the essential thing. They come to the world and suffer because of lack of discriminating wisdom. Vishista says. He says right there. Let me read it. Embodied souls, who are really Atman, have arrived at their present condition of suffering due to want of spiritual wisdom and the proper discrimination leading to it. Due to that lack, they have entered into the arena of relative existence with the inability to control their senses. This leads to an increase of both desire and egotism. The consorting of these two foster agyana, or avidya. That's, of course, ignorance. The presence of root ignorance, that is the cause of all disease. And so from there we look at some of these diseases, which I must say maybe as a kind of qualifier for this chart, many of these things, not maybe the ones at the lower floors that are really suffering, many of these things can be looked at as positive things if the mind is in the right position. Like, say, family, wife, spouse, and children. If that's dharmic, no problem. It's actually a great blessing, as Ramakrishna said that, Swami Vivekananda said that. The man who is a recluse or a monk has no right to pretend superiority over the householder, because each one of them have their own destiny, their own place to find, as long as they're dharmic, as long as that great healing elixir is imbibed lifetime to lifetime. So these were very broad-minded souls who both were renunciates, basically, and lived very ascetic lifestyles. And of course, with the Holy Mother there poised between them. So we can climb these floors. Might be fun to say at the top first, the doctor is Ishvara, like Ramakrishna is the president of politics. So the medical community, the greatest doctor is going to be Ishvara. He's going to be the one that dispenses this wisdom. Because there it is, he's going to give you injections of Atmagyan serum. See, there's one room in the hospital where they're hoarding that. See, the seers are hoarding that. Step in here and you have a needle. My teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, used to tell me that the West needs an injection of Brahmagyan. So he had a supply of that serum to shoot into us, and he would do it by hook or by crook, sometimes by scolding, sometimes by a sweet smile, sometimes by the transmission of Dharma straight into your mind, one-on-one. But there's the medical staff. And those are the rishis, good overall term for seers, saints, sages, avadutas, luminaries of different kinds. They again have as many different ways of life, lifestyles, and methods as people have maladies. So their talents are, that's why they're in the body, is to help you with those. And the healer is of gurus. They're the acharyas, the gurus, the dharma teachers. They're all continuing on with the lineage, guru parampara style. You find them every once in a while amongst groups, taking that vow, talk about vrata, to help illumine, to help awaken all living beings. The Buddhists have sayings like that. We want to make sure we do away with the suffering of all living beings. I'd like to add in a word there. Let's do away with all the unnecessary suffering of living beings, because there are many necessary sufferings you're going to have to face up to, and that's if you believe in the first noble truth. Suffering is. So without contradicting ourselves here, we have to make sure that even the healing nepenthe of Atmagyan nectar is not going to give you eternal life of the body. The body's going to have to come and go. But that, of course, as Holy Mother said, what does a man of wisdom fear of rebirth? You can see over here, moksha is outside of the hospital and all the diseases that is contained there. So then there's the office of signed release forms. Just to follow Sri Ramakrishna's saying, you see, Basically, you can't get out of the hospital until the doctor signs your release form. So that's really like qualified non-dualism. Non-dualism is why did you sign in the first place? And then, of course, dualism has to do with all these problems that people have. They arrive to the condition of suffering due to this lack of proper discrimination. Viveka, beautiful word there. So, I'm not going to get overall agreement. I'm not going to be popular, see. As my guru once said, how can I be popular? See, when I'm giving out these teachings that people don't agree with. So I would say that I would like to be very positive that this first one is definitely a disease, but I'm going to find plenty of people that don't agree with me. And they're used to the tamo guna and the raja guna and its mixture, and they make their living on that. They are violent by nature. A lot of people don't like even the teaching about that. I have people argue with me about that. But just go to Krishna's Gita and find that beautiful chapter, the division between the divine and the demoniacal. See, it's very well put in English. Division between the divine and the demoniacal. And you just see if the Lord of this world, of these worlds, has anything compromising to say about the demoniacal. He lists all their traits and qualities, and they're fully ensconced in that. Yet, wonder of wonders, they have the Atman in them too. As Sri Ramakrishna explained later, Good God blog, their gold is just buried under mounds of earth. And all these, there's where you'd want to know the cosmic systems, right? The gunas, how that starts out, how it influences thought, how thought becomes dark, restless dark, how it becomes a complex, turns into samskara, goes with you to your next state of awareness when you die, comes back with you, you don't do anything about it, it compounds and exacerbates itself until you've got people who believe in violence. Go figure. I'd also like to make a point with the disease of warmongering. There are people who are making their living off of this kind of himsa. See, I said hamsa, not himsa. Go to the great swan, or the great swami. But don't go towards this violent attitude, and don't propagate it amongst the society. If there's a new politic, there has to be a new military. I myself had a recording studio right down the street from Schofield Barracks, it was called. So these army men would come, visit, they'd have to be on the island for a while, serving their military time. And so they'd come to the recording studio. We have a band, a military band. Can you record us? Sure, come on in. So, I got to know them. During the breaks of the recording sessions, we'd talk with each other. And I said, well, I have a kind of a different opinion about the military, and I want to share it with you, And they agreed with everything I said. We didn't really want to get into the military to go over and kill people. We think we should be helping people, really helping them. I realized that they were very sincere. Walk up to the bank a couple blocks away, a couple of them standing at the door, recognized me as the recording engineer down the street, a strange guy that has an altar hidden in his recording studio behind curtains. And they'd see me coming, open the door, sir, please go in, So I really thought that people had that gold buried under them, some of them maybe not so deep, that they really had higher ideals for the vocation that they got into, and that the powers that be, were taking it and using it in the wrong ways. So warmongering would mean that, just like you're born in a line of lawyers or line of doctors or line of workers, you'd be born in a line of generals and officers and so forth. And not that all of them necessarily want war, but it's part of the vocation, just like a doctor's vocation is to heal sick people. So if nobody's sick, he doesn't make any money. That's called Maya. So if you're looking how to heal, via dharma and spiritual path, how to transform the particular lineage that you're in, or the particular family line you're in, your ancestors and so forth, then lights will show up. They say if a person gains enlightenment in one lifetime, 12 generations of his family on either side become saved. That's how powerful enlightenment is. That it can, 12 generations in the future will know God because of you, and 12 generations back will be freed from bondage, like the bondage of ancestor samsara, by that one person getting free. So that's how powerful it is, and how beings talk about it. The disease of evil doing, immorality, I don't suppose anyone who's suffered it would disagree with that. The diseases of the body might as well be thrown in there next, the next floor, because everyone gets those. The yogis get them very seldom. They like to make that point, that they eat less, they exert in restlessness less, they dull their actions in inaction, and they eat pure foods with mantra recited over it, and they do all sorts of other things that we know from our own path and our own lineage that we're in, Ramakrishna order, and that this is a way to live a balanced dharmic life, or even a divine life, like we saw the direct disciples, 16 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Disease of worldliness, I have good authority to put that down because that's how Sri Ramakrishna quoted it. That the disease of worldliness in this age has become chronic. So he was aware. Even in Calcutta in the 1800s, he never left India. Didn't go very far from Bengal. So he was seeing that in the Hindu people of the time. Disease of worldliness has become chronic in this age. It's like a kind of, surprise. Like, gee, I didn't know that happened. It's like Vivekananda coming back after 1,000 years since his last birth and saying, what have you done to my India in 1,000 years? And what's the rest of this nonsense? Like warmongering and things going on. Why are the English in my country committing injustices? So you become a nation of dyspeptics, he called them. So as these go up the floors and into the different stations of this hospital, the disease of forgetfulness, I'm kind of doing this in some sort of a hierarchy, rising on a ladder. So disease of forgetfulness, I've been thinking about that lately, and I've given a seminar recently on vismriti, it's called, how the forgetfulness of where you've come from, your last birth, and what a problem that is. Smriti, asmriti, vismriti is another great Triputi teaching. Daiva smriti, divine memory. I think that's what the core of India is about, as far as embodiment is concerned. They have Daiva smriti. They'll trace their ancestors not back, but in. For one thing, the direction is different. What else is different is they're all aspiring to become children of the sun god, or of the line of the Vrishnas, or the line of the Shaivites, or the line of that comes from, it's like Lord Vashishta being the 10th mind-born child of Lord Brahma. They trace their incarnations back in because they know that the bodies have come out. Gross bodies come out of the subtle body. Subtle body leads to the causal body. So this is knowing the cosmology, right? You don't have to be a great philosopher. You just have to read it, see it, understand it, agree with it, and then just live in it. Well, that's the way it is. I know the cosmic process. You're free as soon as you know the cosmic process. And you're bound if you don't. You're blinded. You're caught off guard all the time if you just think there's one world. And what to say, that kind of stuntedness is painful to even hear about. So I've been thinking about forgetfulness, and I would say basically I'd like to approach it better from remembrance. Because forgetfulness can, cause you to forget, but remembrance will cause you to remember. Don't forget to remember your Mother Durga's precious name. Shri Durga Nam Budana Budana. I could sing it for you. So there's a beautiful song in that where one of the followers of the Shakta traditions, Durga's my ideal. Don't forget to remember your Mother Durga's precious name. In gold ink on parchment in front of my guru, I signed my name to be a follower of the Mother. That was an event in my life. Right there in Portland, Oregon. And he had come from India, decades earlier. And we'd settled down right there. I was born right there, across the river from him, just to make that signature. And at that time, all my problems were over. All my ignorance had died. And I was myself again. So remembrance, diseases of forgetfulness. Remembrance is one of the ingredients of the Atmagyan serum that you want to have. Disease of worldliness, Sri Ramakrishna has mentioned that. We said the disease of materialism / greed. Again, Swami Vivekananda amazed that we were so much masters of technology and had so much control over nature, but then mere babes in spirituality, to quote him, just mere babies. He wrote back to his brother disciples who were to come, Turiyananda and a few, Abhedananda, come west, you take over these centers, I can't do it myself. So they came, and he wrote them, said, just remember when you come here, they're just babies in spirituality. You'll be amazed at their powers, but they're just babies. They don't know a thing in spirituality. They've been raised in irreligion, to think they're sinners, and to believe in, heaven-seeking. Well, yeah, I'm getting there. Heaven-seeking senses is one of these diseases. This is why I made the qualifier at the beginning, because it doesn't necessarily have to be. You could go to heaven to help your ancestors, but to get caught in that loop was one of Buddhist main teachings. To always be caught under the influence of your ancestors. The disease of irreligion and irreverence, which I just mentioned, Vivekananda. So, it just didn't come here to the West to say, oh, Christianity's fallen after 2,000 years. He also told us, you should see my India. What a horrible state that's in. They don't remember their own scriptures anymore. They're worse off than you, because they're tamasic, you're rajasic. There's things like this he was. So it wasn't here to come just to say, oh, we're better than you. Say, actually, we're worse than you right now. But neither of you, all of you, have forgotten your true nature, and somehow lost the desire to live in peace and harmony, decided on war instead, and making money from it and so forth. So materialism and greed, I used to say, religion accepts politics into its fold. It's not religion anymore. Immediately it goes out the window. I stand very strong on that opinion. It's not religion anymore when it courts the things of politics. You have to keep it in its ivory tower. It has to be, spirituality has to be separated from the world, particularly at the beginning. Later on, maybe, if you're strong enough, you can, like I used to say that. Do you do your mala practice, your mantra? I asked one woman, a student. I do it on the bus on the way to work. I said, that wasn't my instruction. You want to do it in the shrine room in the morning, before you go to work. and concentrate just on it. So, finally I had to like say, no, you don't do them. You don't eat in the bathroom, Make a meal, take it in the bathroom and eat. May be practical in a sense, but you don't do that. It's just not done. So basically you don't practice spirituality in the world, and you don't bring the world into the spirit. That's naivete. And it's an admixture that's unhealthy. You keep them sacrosanct. That's why you have a shrine that's separate from every other room in your house. And you don't put it in your bedroom, if you can at all help it. Put a curtain around it or something. See, those activities you do that are with the Lord, for the Lord, in front of the Lord, they're sacrosanct. You keep them that way if you want the pure result of practice from them. Because they're not like anything else in the world. Everything else is tainted. I was playing with the idea of using illness instead of disease, or sickness. There were other words I could have given them definitions to smooth the medicine going down. Because as we move on, you'll see some of these are, like heaven seeking. So wasn't that a good thing? So a lot of people are thinking that that's the goal of life. But our Upanishads say, we saw the heaven-aspiring senses when we were practicing, and we saw that we were coming under the control of our ancestors. And after we started worshipping the gods, we saw that they also had a desire to dominate over us. I think we're coming to that disease of domination. That's one of the great problems. It's an occult power, actually. It's one of the 8 occult powers. So that comes after disease of irreligion and irreverence. So when will man, be kind to man, quit dominating over him, start helping him along the path? I say that any race that's, any race, any color, any creed that's going under problems, repression and so forth, they'll start fighting with themselves when they start getting freedom. So it's the problem with every war and every revolution, every solution, every new government. It just goes on, and people just stand there and keep going through this cycle. I renounce it. I stop it right now. I'm not going to participate in it anymore. Why should I? This is ridiculous. It's nonsense. It's causing suffering to myself and to others. And so if you want to do that as a monk, you do it totally. If the Red Chinese come into your country and raid your palace, okay, take it. I've renounced it. Why should I want it anymore? As the Dalai Lama did. Some of the monks wanted to fight back. He said, no, you've renounced the world. Why should you fight them? So, grant unto Caesar what is Caesar's, if you want to put it that way. The disease of racism is one wing of the hospital. Probably most of us would agree with that, but even the last few days I've seen the people who have that disease and the way they think. The diseases of apathy / complacency. This begins to get now into people's practice and the solutions that we looked at. If they can get over that tendency to compromise with the truth and ameliorate, bring all the good qualities together inside of them, focus that, concentrate that, and leave these other tendencies aside, then they'll build a great strength. Otherwise, it's like getting a vaccination, that has unhealthy things in it. You've got this admixture running through your bloodstream, body-mind mechanism bloodstream, and you begin to suffer from those things, and they keep you from the goal. The disease of giving up the goal. You want to jump to the high south wing here. That's at a very spiritual level that happens. The disease of distraction. I already mentioned that. It's obvious. That's Rajas, pure red. and it can turn darker, brown, and but basically my own experience with that was when I met my Tibetan teacher, Jamgon Khantrul Rinpoche, and I heard him say to a group of us, there was a time, when worldliness was the greatest problem, because we had said, Sri Ramakrishna had said, worldliness is a great problem. He said, but now, in this time now, I think distraction is the worst problem for people. That was back in Maui, this other island over here, in the 1980s. I heard him say that. And distraction has now become the greatest problem, he said. So he's making his own pronouncement about that. And you can see how it's happened in some of the subtle ways in which it's happened. That people are going to accept Maya face value just because the technology is rolling that way, just because the money is flowing that way. And they're going to go with the conventions and not disturb the flow, man. So that's going to be something that you're, again, going to have to not compromise with if you're serious about getting rid of these diseases that have their origins in the mind. I mean, notice the subtitle again. It's basically mind-borne illnesses that afflict human beings. Mind-borne illnesses. We're making that real clear that these all begin in the mind, which was Lord Vasishtha's teaching. From there, I think I shifted to these diseases which are of a subtler nature, just put it that way. Disease of ancestor worship, family, spouse, and job comes first. That's called Ishanatrayam. So actually the Tantra supports me there, saying that the family, spouse, siblings, offspring, if they're not guided by the Dharma and steered toward a higher place, then it plays into what went before: worldliness, selfishness, pleasure and enjoyments. And pretty soon one recognizes this as being a problem with the ancestors, like Lord Buddha said, and that the rebirth process is really stemming from that. Samsara is really flowing at those three lower chakras, probably including the 7 hells below it too. And that beings are come back violent from these lower realms, which are in the mind. They're not out in space. They're in the mental process, the thinking process. So those thoughts have become very darkened or horribly vacuous. I mean, talk about gaps in consciousness. Those gaps are lifetimes long. The diseases of personality worship are one of the things that Swami Vivekananda mentioned. Why he didn't mention Sri Ramakrishna for the longest time when he came to America and to London, because he didn't want them to fall into the same problem that other religions had fallen into. And people said, well, how can that be avoided? And he said, it can't, but it can be put off. They will fall into personality worship before long, and they'll take their savior, like I like and hate to say, use them as a doormat instead of a doorway. That'll just happen. But this is where the hospital is a higher floor now, and people here wish they were there. They're suffering deep, dark, tamasic, rajasic, klista life, Clistivity life, and they don't know any better. Many of them, how you've seen sick people who are chronically sick. They have no hope, and a lot of suffering there, and they're not thinking high thoughts, or they're afraid to give up the body. Fear of death is there too at the same time. So it's a very difficult proposition. When I caught a view of the ocean of suffering, my mind recoiled in horror. And I prayed to the Mother, may I never fall into that. May I never fall into that. The song sing in India. The horrible ocean of samsara. Turn your hair white early. Get a glimpse of that too close. Disease of heaven seeking, mentioned that already. and the disease of rebirth and ignorance. That's kind of, maybe at the hub of all of these, if you go to Vishishta's teaching. If you're reborn in ignorance, you come back, all these diseases are in the mind. They're all waiting to have their moment. Every dog has his day, as Vivekananda put it. So they're all barking at the gates, waiting to have their moment with you. That's why suffering is, and there's a cause for it. And then there's a way out of it. So as we go up from the emergency ward up to the higher floors where we can get our release sign formed by Sri Ramakrishna, basically you say, go to him in meditation, will you release me from the bondage and chains of this world? Can you do that right away for me so I can breathe freely? Shri Guru Pada Ambuja Parase Siradara Duri Paryag Ramakrishna Yasha Chira Tavala Paranayo Ati Anurag Jnana Jnana Nahin Yoga Bala Karma Dharma Nahin Ramakrishna Mo Dina Ko DJ Vimala Vivekam Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karunamaya Jaya Kripa Nidana 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 Kaya Gamana Kahin Tava Tattva Sapane Vishnu Kaheya Bhaka Tumarege Haleba Avatara Dharma Galani Haraba Samsara Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karunamaya Jaya Kripa Nidana Prostrating at the Guru's lotus feet and placing their pollen dust upon my head, I always sing of Sri Ramakrishna's glories, pure and eternal, with immense love. Knowledge, meditation, yoga, karma, and dharma, I am lacking in these. O Ramakrishna, kindly bestow on this impoverished devotee pure discrimination and pure love, so that we may all be released from this hospital of the world. Om Sato Ma Satgamoya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamoya, Mrityur Ma Amritam Gamaya, Abir Abir Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshina Mukam, Tenamam Bhavinecham, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat.